Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Rudman, Artistic Director of the Musical Theater Project. Welcome to our Q&A for 42nd Street, as in come and meet those dancing feet, which you have already done. I know you're reading your instructions right now for how to participate. You got to read the instructions. And while you do that, I want to remind you, I do this every time, that we're not just looking for questions tonight. We want comments on anything that comes up, or I could say anything you'd like to bring up yourself. And I'm so happy to say, because I've been wanting for this to happen, that tonight I got the co-host I was looking for. Many of you know him because he's worked with us on other projects. He's a communications professor at John Carroll University. So let's say a virtual hello to Bob Knoll.
Thank you, Bill. Glad to be here this evening.
Good to have you, Bob. We've been friends for, I'm not going to tell them how many years.
Yes.
But I will tell them that going back to the 1970s.
70s, yeah, it was 70s.
You're the only one in Cleveland I know who literally worked for the three major producers of musical theater in our town. So that's Milton Kranz at the Hannah, and Johnny Price at Music Carnival, and John Kenley at the Kenley Players. So you're bringing a lot of musicals to the table and to our computer screens tonight, and it's really good to have you.
Glad to be here, Bill.
You know, as you know, Bob, better than anybody, because you did TV for so many years, it's customary to give the closing credits at the end. But I want to do it at the beginning. I want to say that we are indebted to Debbie Schinker and Heidi Lang and Joanna May Cullinan and Playhouse Square's Daniel Hahn, without whom you would all be in a lot of trouble as we work our way through this new technology. So thanks to you guys. And Bob, I want to, before we get the questions and comments coming from the audience, I want to ask you something, which springs from a conversation I had with one of our members this morning, who said, you know, I really liked the introduction to 42nd Street, which made me happy because I did the introduction. But she said, I didn't so much like the movie. And I thought, great. And I said to her, say that tonight when we get to the Q&A, because that's what we really want tonight. I'd be delighted if it were 50% pro and 50% con when it comes to this music. I think we can agree that it's an important film, but whether you like it or not is a whole other matter. So Bob Knoll, what do you think of this movie?
Well, I've seen this movie 3 times, okay? And what I love about it, of course, are the dances, the crazy dances with Bugsy Berkeley. And hopefully we talk more about that later. And also the songs. But the problem I have with that is the songs come at the end of the show, basically. It is not really a musical. So that's one thing. So you sit there and you watch this pretty heavy, dramatic piece, which is well acted. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate the writing and what this is about depression in the 30s. And let's put on a show and have a ruthless director trying to save his career and his life, basically. That's all great, but then it is depressing. And then comes a wonderful scene where the understudy saves the day, and that's life affirming and wonderful. But then, how does the director end this movie? One guy outside the stage door, sitting there alone, because this is during the Depression. So in other words, do I like it? I appreciate it. I think it's kind of a classic in which you can learn about it. But is it entertaining? It's pretty entertaining. But again, you have to understand, you have to go into it thinking this is not just your average musical.
No, certainly is not. So we're going to open this up now, and Bob is going to be sort of the 3rd grade teacher who calls on people one way or another. But you know, we wondered sort of how long these Q&As should be, and we think that the last time around we got it right. This ran about 45 minutes. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to go to about 7:45. Bob, call on one of those people eager to share their thoughts.
Okay, what you need to do is raise your hand so I could see you, so I could, or give me the little hand sign. Anybody have a question to start off with or comment? Okay, Jane? Okay, I'm sorry, Steve. He doesn't have his audio.
It was going to be Don Horn.
There we go.
Oh.
There we go.
Here he comes.
In Shuffle Off to Buffalo, Ginger Rogers starts to sing the word belly, but changes it to tummy in the middle of the word. Yeah. What's the story with that? It seems like a mistake.
It does. Boy, we're starting out with a brilliant question. Yeah, it does seem like a mistake. And I used to think it was a mistake until I read that actually it was the censor changing from one word, changing from tummy to belly. That was the censor's decision, but Ginger Rogers wanted to make a joke out of it, so she did what she did. Thank you for that, Don. So Don, while we've got you right here, how do you like the movie in general?
Well, I've seen it before. I liked it much better now after having watched your introduction, because it really helped me realize that it wasn't just fluff, that it wasn't just melodrama. It was connected with the time. What I wondered was how typical that was of that time. Because if you look at the Broadway musicals of that time, that was not done. It was,
No.
And I wondered if this was a situation where the movies were doing in the 30s what the Broadway musicals were doing in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah, and Bob, chime in wherever you want to here.
Okay.
This movie is unusual in the way it is attached so directly to the Depression. The only other movie musical I can think of that does this is Hallelujah, I'm a Bum, very obscure, by Rodgers and Hart. But yeah, and actually one of our members corrected me on a mistake I made in the introduction about when Franklin Roosevelt's inaugural speech was made in comparison to the release date for this movie. And in fact, the movie was released just 5 days after the inauguration. I mean, that's incredible. So the movie really caught something in the air. Yeah, thank you, Don.
Bob, more questions? Anybody? Okay, go on, Bruce. Go on.
Good evening.
Samsel.
In the finale, the grand finale, when they're doing 42nd Street and all the police are prancing around on ponies and
yeah,
and the whole thing goes. At the end of it, where Dick Powell and Ruby Keeler are in the room, looking out the window from the hotel room, and they close the shade, it says asbestos.
Yes.
And I understand that this is an inside gag on the fact that in theaters they used to have an asbestos curtain.
Yep.
A fire curtain that would drop to separate the stage from the audience. But it was also a double gag in that they're saying that what's going on behind the closed window is pretty hot.
Yeah, that's right. And, that's one of the points we made in the introduction is this movie, there's a lot of sex in this movie. Not explicitly so, but subtext. It is there. And certainly Busby Berkeley, my favorite example of it is that the closing shot in Young and Healthy when the camera, Bob, you should talk about this.
Yeah, I was just going to say that he has his camera moving all over the place, getting really intimate shots of women's legs and their bodies and all that very quickly. And it's a tracking shot, which must have been very difficult because these cameras were like gigantic refrigerators. And they were plus they were making tons of noise, which is why they had to be encased, to keep some of the noise out the level, even though they dubbed the music, later and all that, but it was so distracting. It was like a bulldozer going around the set when that camera is moving. And yeah, and Bugsy really he was trying to have as much fun as he could, I guess.
Yeah.
And he was using all kinds of different angles and
I
everything.
hope I didn't hit that by accident.
He was really, choreographing with that camera as much as anything, as much as staging the movements.
Well, he was, and he was lucky because when he entered the scene and made 42nd Street, he had more freedom for the camera to move than had been the case just a couple of years before that. The technology changed that fast. So he was at the right place at the right time. And we should just say that famous shot at the end when Young and Healthy, when he goes under the legs of all of those chorus girls, that is famously known as the Busby Berkeley crotch shot. I hope that doesn't offend anybody, but it's true.
And another thing about, I'm sorry.
Bill,
Go on, Bruce.
at the end of, or let's see, Shuffle Off to Buffalo is sung by Ruby Keeler and some unnamed gentleman.
Right.
And then the song that Dick Powell does,
Young and Healthy.
Young and Healthy, ends up with him and an unnamed blonde.
Right.
And yet at the very end of 42nd Street, it's Dick Powell and Ruby Keeler who pull down the window. It seems that they got some couples mixed up there somewhere.
It does, and Bruce, nobody really understands that. The blonde that comes in at the tail end of Young and Healthy was a young actress named Toby Wing, who was known in Hollywood as the Young and Healthy girl. Because actually that's just about all she did. She made 4 movies and she was gone. And nobody knows why it wasn't Ruby in that number, but whatever.
One thing before we move on about that, the Warner Brothers stage, I actually was there a couple of years ago, and it has a high ceiling, which of course worked out very good for Mr. Bugsley Berkeley. And something that was kind of interesting is that where he might have got the idea for those ceiling shots, he was in World War I. He served in the Army, and one of his jobs was the U.S. Air Corps, and one of his jobs was to take pictures from the ceiling of airplanes during World War I. So think about that. We got that idea for that. And of course, the other thing, as someone who used to be a producer director, that would drive me nuts when it comes to when you actually film all those dancers, something we sometimes forget is there's hydraulics going up and down. These people, all these bodies are in this area that's going up and down. And if anybody's been in the theater, how dangerous that could be. But they were all brave. They just did it. They did everything he said. Neil has a question. Neil? Okay.
Oh, here from Neil. Neil wants to know: do the songwriters make a cameo appearance towards the beginning of the movie? You guys are amazing. Yes, they do. They're on camera for about 8 seconds, but yeah, they did make a cameo appearance. That would be Harry Warren and Al Dubin, who wrote only 5 songs for this movie, but a wonderful score. And Bob, I just want to add something that you said about Busby Berkeley earlier, that he was crazy. He was so crazy that when they were making this movie, the production numbers that were really crazy, they weren't filmed until late at night, because that's when the suits at Warner Brothers had all gone home and they couldn't see what Busby Berkeley was doing that was so insane. That's
just imagine what the insurance people would have thought too. Oh,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, some more questions?
We've got one.
Herbert?
Oh, go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
Herbert? You have a question, Herbert?
Yes, I do. Was the movie a financial success?
Yes, and that, by the way, that's Herb Drower, who is a big fan of On the Aisle, our radio show in Chicago. And we're so glad you're back with us, Herb, because you were here 2 weeks ago, too.
Yes,
but I never saw your beard before. It's pretty terrific.
I know.
You want to know whether it was a financial success? It was an off-the-wall financial success. at a time, in the depths of depression. People wanted to see this movie. And Bob, you were kind of alluding to this earlier, that in some ways this movie is very dark, and yet it winds up in a very hopeful place, which seemed to catch the mood of America just as FDR was beginning to execute his New Deal.
And the fact I think it was over the top just added to the fantasy of it too, which made people really feel good.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I think they really must have appreciated when they first saw this,
Yeah,
since movies were not that old.
right. And there had never been any movie musical like this. I want to apologize to all of you because our tech people they're swearing at me because we're hearing email sounds, and it's my fault. I thought I had turned off. I'm sorry, everybody. Debbie Sheeker has a question. She says, if the camera is so big and soundproof, how did they do Under the Lake shot? Yeah, what had happened, Debbie, was that the technology had changed by then. And in the preview, I showed that scene from The Broadway Melody in 1929, and that's when the camera was just frozen. But by the time Busby Berkeley got to 42nd Street, it was his big playground. He could do anything he wanted.
And also, they really mastered the trucking shot. Where the camera moves because it's literally on tracks,
yeah,
or it's rolled. And he really had that down perfectly. So it was still a big camera, but you can lug it really well with the crew.
This takes you to your TV days,
yes,
when you had really big cameras.
And you had to have stagehands, and they had to be male because they couldn't move these things. Okay, some more questions, comments? Anybody? Okay, Bruce?
You were asking about whether I like this show. The movie, I think, is way too dark. I enjoyed the Broadway version of it much better, especially since it has a song "Lullaby of Old Broadway" in it that they sing to the Ruby Keeler character in the train station while she's trying to escape. Yeah, I would have really liked to see Jerry Orbach do that show.
I saw him do it in the third week of the run on Broadway. I saw the original cast. Yeah. And Bruce, I will just say, just for the record, that you and I can respectfully agree to disagree. I like the 1933 movie more than what Gower Champion did with it on Broadway, where it became on Broadway this song and dance extravaganza with hardly anything between the musical numbers. So Bob, I'm disagreeing with you too, because you're complaining that you had to wait until the last 20 minutes to really get to the heart of the songs. That's one of the things I love about it, in addition to this great, how did you guys like the gritty black and white of this movie?
I was just about to ask if there was a colorized version of this movie.
Oh, God forbid. This movie should only be seen in black
Thanks,
and white.
Dan. I like the expression.
Okay. Jane, you have a question? Jane?
Jane Steger?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I didn't particularly care for the movie, and I didn't find it ending on a hopeful note. The director was just so unhappy and unsettled at the end. If he had been recognized for his work and saw some hopefulness in his situation, that would have worked for me, but it left me wanting more.
And for me, I had a hard time being sympathetic with the director.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All he did was sit in a chair, look to stage left, smoke a cigarette, and yell faster, faster, faster.
Yeah.
So he never contributed to the quality of the show.
No empathy.
He was putting together, and he just always acted like he wasn't even involved. He was just complaining the whole time. So in the last scene when Mary was all depressed, well, he kind of deserved it.
Yeah.
Okay, Dan?
Bob, you and I should talk about this. I appreciate that, Dave and Jane. But a couple of things. One is, got to remember that Julian Marsh, the director, was literally dying. as he made this movie, and he took it on to get some money because he was almost broke. So that's one thing. But then, Bob, you should comment on this too, because one of the things I like is that it's a pretty darn realistic treatment of a lot of people in the theater. Not everybody, but the thing about being a director for the stage is after that opening, when that opening night curtain goes up, the director has just lost control of it and will never really get it back again in the same way. And there are a lot of directors, stage directors, who become despondent about that because they've invested so much in it, right?
Yeah, and something I also felt about that was, when the theater, except for the front of the stage, which is bright, but behind the stage is dark. And the people's lives are often dark too, the people that are in the theater. So I think that expressed it pretty well. And I do disagree about the ending. I do find it kind of depressing, like Jane was saying, because remember how it ended. It ended with that guy on the street. All that was there inside the theater, but outside where he was, it was still a depression. It was still a tough life ahead.
Yeah, good point.
I know Dan's got something to say here. Dan?
Okay, I'm unmuted now.
Oh, Daniel.
Hello, friend. I love. First of all, I love seeing everybody on this. I love seeing my friend like Jan Roberts, who I know is tuned into all these, and just some wonderful people.
And look at you worked out your backdrop.
I got my little 42nd Street over the show. My mom is actually tuning in tonight, Bill, to see you for the first time. So I'm trying to get her hooked on the musical theater project. She's watched these movies. But Warner Baxter, our director. So here's a guy who's won the Academy Award for Best Actor just at the very second Academy Awards. He's, without question, talented. So Chrissy and I, my wife and I, were arguing like the whole film. I love this movie. And she was like, who would want to work for that director? That guy does nothing but yell at people the whole time. Oh my gosh. Now, I would say this. One, you're right. I think when you say that this movie only could have happened in the Great Depression, people so desperate.
Yes, for work.
You're not going to talk back to the director, and this guy's got an edge anyway. And I think, for me, two points I want to bring up about him. One, when we see finally the payoff of his direction in the show, the end, I mean, how can you, Buffalo Gales, how can you not just see that number and say, I get why they hired him. I get why they want to work with him. The guy's a genius. We don't see it in the process, but we see it in his result. Second thing I would say is that there's that one scene outside the theater between him and that younger gentleman, like his associate or his assistant, where he talks about, stick around with me, I'm lonely tonight, where he's got that, he just lets his guard down, and there's that affection, almost with an underpinning eroticism, I might say, between those two. And maybe the language of the 30s is coloring my take on some of the way that played out, because if you just read those lines, it does seem quite affectionate. But I thought that was just such a maybe more risky than I expected movie. Anyway, those are just a couple of my thoughts. And I also love the gangster, who was like going to go rough up people. I'm like, man, that guy's right out of a Cagney movie.
Well, the studio that gave us Cagney and Edward G. Robinson. Yeah, it's all of a piece.
Anyway, those are some of my thoughts. I loved it. I didn't mind that it ended. And a little darkness and despair. I think a lot of great artists have that maybe tortured heart as well. And I thought, I wish he maybe would have been a little more nuanced throughout, and we could have had a little bit more light in his character. Okay, but at the end of the day, wow, what a powerhouse.
And Daniel, as I'm sure you know, because you said he won the Oscar 1 or 2 years before he made this movie. The other thing that's cool about Warner Baxter is that he successfully made the transition from silent films to sound films. And many, many, many actors in those days couldn't do it. They were washed up as soon as sound was introduced, But also, Daniel, and here's another point, when you talk about how impressive the show is when it's all finished, yes, it is. But we should remind ourselves, I think, that there's a lot of white privilege going on in this movie. that, you know, in the beginning when we see, well, there must be 150 auditioning kids on that stage. Not one of them is a person of color. Not one. And in fact, I mean, that was realistic. That's the way it was then. And there wasn't an integrated ensemble in a Broadway musical for another 11 years when we got to On the Town by Bernstein, Comden, and Green, where the lead dancer was Asian American and there were 6 African American men in the company. And then, and I know you're a big fan of him, Daniel, 3 years after On the Town, famously, Yip Harburg's Finian's Rainbow. But that was a long time coming. And in 1933, very sad, but very true, it was a white thing.
Well, even our royal wedding film that we saw, you know,
Yes.
if you're looking for diversity in film, you're not going to find a lot in royal weddings, certainly either.
No. And in 42nd Street, there are, I think, 6 African Americans in the company. 3 of them or 4 of them are dancing children. And in terms of the adults, there's only 1 adult who has a speaking role that's 1 or 2 lines.
Hey, Bill and Bob, Wayne's had his hand up very patiently.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay,
Next in the line.
okay. Wayne.
And then Sue.
Okay, Wayne, and then
Hi.
Sue.
Hi, how y'all doing?
Hi, Wayne. Good to have you back with us.
Oh, good to be here.
Made it through the first time this week.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. For me, the movie didn't really come alive until the show, until the Pretty Lady show debuted. And but the thing is that I loved those sequences so much that it kind of made up for it, and I ended up really kind of liking the film quite a bit. And also, I think I really did like its sort of darkness. You know, I think you know, the director's story was dark. I think leaving him in the alley, you know, at the end of the film was really good. But one of the things too, somebody said that they felt the film was really dramatic. I felt like it was really funny. Like there was so much innuendo going on, and the character bits there were a lot of like really funny little characters in the film, and I found it to be, you know, a pretty funny movie.
Would you buy the notion that it's both? That it kind of goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, constantly surprising us.
Yeah.
With the humor, but then these little serious nanoseconds. The one Daniel Hahn quoted.
Yeah.
Where the director says, "Would you come back home with me?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also had a question about it, which was this was, you know, one of those movies, and there are a lot of them, a lot of musical movies that take place in the theater where the actual show could never be accommodated in an actual theater. Like, I mean, and just in terms of like, from the minute that train opens, it's off, you know, in terms of like, you know, but then, you know, that kind of escalated in the years to come with things like Esther Williams and whatever. Was this kind of the first film to do that kind of like, where it's like, you know, a cast of millions and horses and trains and cars going through on the stage?
I think, Bob, and you'll have to tell me if I'm right or wrong about this, I think it was. And that even in Shuffle Off to Buffalo, when there's the train, you can actually see the train split apart and fill the stage. So that technically it makes it into a theater space, but by the time you get to Young and Healthy, which is the next musical number, you're right, there's no way that could be done in a theater. And that became one of Busby Berkeley's trademarks.
That's what I was going to say. He now it's his movie now, you know. So it takes over. So that's why, you know, that's why in a musical, if the director's the choreographer, guess what? You're going to have a lot of dance, you know. It's that kind of thing. So you got this guy here. He's going to make sure he's going to get his minutes in. Yeah.
I had one other question, and it was basically about, and I could have looked this up, but I didn't. About the code, you know, the code of decency or whatever. Yes. Where did this film fall in that? Because it didn't seem. I mean, it was it had a lot of naughty stuff going on in it, but it also didn't seem as risque as some of the pre-code films that I've seen.
Yeah, very well spotted. What I learned in researching this, I didn't know it, was that the code was in effect, but it wasn't quite being fully enforced yet.
Mhm.
So we sort of see something that falls between the lines, as it were. Yeah. I see something in capital letters. That's always important. Bridget Emerson has a hand raised. Don't you, Bridget?
But you have to call on Sue first.
Okay. Oh,
I do. I'm unmuting.
please.
Hello.
Yes. Wayne and Sue know you see them and call on them soon. Yeah, we did. Bridget Emerson also has a hand raised now. Did I get that right?
Sue
Is it
has
my
a question.
I have a question, but I'm not going anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, my question is about or my observations about the number. I think it was beginning to be a habit with me that we see in the rehearsal, where is it the Dorothy Brock character?
Dorothy Brock, yeah.
He's with several men in black shirts. That first of all, there's hardly any dancing. The movements are so not like any of the other dancing in the show, even in I know it's a rehearsal, but still,
Right.
it's a kind of lame number with this wonderful song. And she's singing "You're Beginning to Be a Habit with Me," but there's no habit. It's all different men that she's dancing with. I thought that was peculiar. There's all these mixed up couple things that we were talking about before. And also, who is the guy that comes on at the end in a white robe or something and walks off with her? What is that about?
What is that about, Bob? Do you know what
No, I don't know. It must be one of those stereotypes. Wealthy guy coming to the chorus girl. I don't know.
An old guy in a nightgown or something walks
I
off
don't
with
know.
her.
I don't know. It's
know what
eccentric.
My husband has a quick question too.
I have a couple of questions to follow up. Did that movie win any Oscars?
I don't think so. It was nominated for, I believe, 5, but I don't know. I could be wrong about this.
No, I don't think it won.
Let us know if you have the answer to that. Or somebody Google it right now and tell us.
Okay. And the other thing is an observation. I've been humming those tunes ever since.
Yeah.
So we saw the film on Thursday, and it's been nonstop. I even dreamt about it. I had a dream that I was taking vitamin A, from that Young and Healthy song.
Yeah.
To me, that's a great musical, irrespective of the story. When you spend 3 days just humming tunes from it, then it's a success in my mind.
It is. And Sue, can I just disagree partially with what you said about Dorothy Brock just rehearsing the number? That's one of the moments that I like in it, because it is so low key. And it also tells us a lot about the director, Julianne Marsh, who has his head down while she's doing it. And when she's finished with it, it's like, well, this is just a little piece of business. That's how showbiz is. He's not going to stand up and say, oh, Dorothy, that was fantastic. That's not the kind of director he is. He's just accepting what she put out there. That's part of the process. It's one of the realistic moments, I think.
Okay, we have Bridget and we have Don to ask question. Bridget?
Nominated.
So I agree with several of the things that I've heard tonight. The comment about the weird guy in the sheet at the end of that number, I had the same feeling. I'm like, why is she dancing with all these men if she has a habit? So I've had some of the same feelings that other people had expressed. Also, that huge overblown number with the dancing horses, that was not lost on me, that even the horses were doing dressage. Like, that's pretty overkill. So that was exciting to see how big they made that. It was also, for me, nice to see I agree with the statement that the show did come alive once they finally went to the premiere.
Yeah.
Like the train number, it just sort of burst into life at that point. And it was interesting to me from then on, especially with the choreography and the inventive camera angles and all those other things. It was really delightful. I also found it pleasant to see all of the fashion that they showed from the time period, and the makeup and the hair and all the other things. Like, it must have been quite a sight for people in the middle of the Depression to see all these furs everywhere and all these. What about the gold lame pantsuit or silver lame or whatever that was that she was wearing?
That was interesting. So
Yeah.
fashion-wise, it was interesting. The racism component was also not lost on me. That bothered me quite a lot.
Yeah.
That the only people of color in the show were in servant roles.
Yeah.
And like you said, only one had a couple of lines, and it was very racist, the dialogue. So that was offensive to me. One thing that stood out to me was how much the show was like a chorus line.
Uh-huh.
So the reason why I thought that is because, you get to see the nitty gritty behind the show. You get to see what it's like to put a show together. You get to see the struggles of the various people in the show and learn about some of their stories. And it struck me very early on in the show that it was very much like a chorus line.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure if anyone else experienced that.
Yeah, well, and and I think, Bob, you were the one who alluded to this earlier. The desperation of these performers who have to work, they've got to get jobs, which for me is even more powerful in this film than, God, I hope I'll get it in Chorus Line, but that's just me. Oh, we should say that John Schinker was responsible, and he Googled it. And the answer to the question that Bob and I couldn't answer is it was nominated for Best Picture and Best Sound Recording. It didn't win either. Cavalcade won Best Picture that year.
Okay, do we have room for two more people?
Oh, yes, we do.
Questions? Okay, Don is next, and then Steve, okay? Don, you had your hand up. Don?
Oh, I must have hit by accident.
Don?
Is your video unmuted?
I must have hit the button by accident.
We can hear you now, Don. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I must have hit the button by accident.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Your question or comment, Don?
I think he doesn't have one. He said his hand was raised by
Oh, okay. Then Steve. We'll go to Steve.
Okay, I also wanted to just comment. I have a question, but I wanted to comment on the scene that Daniel alluded to with Julian Marsh, where he says, I'm lonely tonight. Won't you come home with me? As opposed to, I'm alone tonight. Let's go get a drink. I think that's really, not really coded at all. It seems kind of obvious.
Actually,
and a very strange little scene for that one little thing.
True, and actually in the novel on which this movie was based, there was a homosexual relationship in it between those two characters.
Daniel has a comment.
Okay,
Daniel.
I would like to say that I love going back and reading the source material and books and things like this for pieces like this. And I was trying to see if I could get a copy of 42nd Street, and none of the libraries had it or anything. And when I found it on Amazon.com.
Did you?
Oh, yeah. If you want to spend $3,500, if you can see that. $450 for a used copy. $3,500. So there must be something smoking hot in this novel that we may not even have gotten in the.
Yeah.
I know that's going to be your donation to the Musical Theater Project.
It is. I'll get you a copy of the book.
Debbie Schinker makes a point here that I think we should underline. She says that the sexism, it was sure there. Did you guys notice that there's sort of decades ahead of when it happened, there's a sort of Harvey Weinstein character in this movie? Did any of you see it? The money guy who is ostensibly the producer, who's trying to seduce Dorothy Brock through much of the movie. You guys notice that?
The Cleveland car dealer.
The Cleveland car dealer.
Right, yes.
That's a great example of sexism. I mean, as played by, who did play that role? Oh, Abner Dillon. You can tell Abner Dillon wasn't going to get anywhere in that sexism or the attempted seduction, but it's there in the movie, it's there.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Anybody
Yes.
have?
Bob?
Yeah.
I think the Ginger Roger character was the most magnanimous character in the entire show. When she was told she was going to move into the lead part after Dorothy broke her leg. She refused it and said,
Yeah.
"You got to go get
Yeah.
the other one." So, I mean, that's completely out of place. If any character is going to say, "Hey, you're going to play the lead tonight," they're just going to jump at it. Yet she passed it on.
Yeah, I know. It's a great moment. Which, can I make an observation about sex again? Because there's a great little moment about sex that I didn't catch until I saw the movie the fifth time last week. And it's Ginger Rogers and Una Merkel when they're doing the cynical chorus of Shuffle Off to Buffalo. Everybody remember that scene, right? And the funny thing is that you've got Ginger Rogers with an apple a la Eve, and you have Una Merkel eating a banana.
Yeah, I saw that.
Bob,
Fine.
anybody else? Oh,
Herbert's got a question.
Okay, good. Herb from Chicago.
After this came out, did they get a bump in their reputations?
Who, the actors or who?
No, the lyricist and the composer.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm glad you pointed that out. Harry Warren and Al Dubin. This was a big break for them to get this movie, and then they went on. I think they did 7 Busby Berkeley film musicals, and they were one of the most successful songwriting teams of that era, even though they never became household words. Harry Warren used to say he was Harry who, because nobody knew who he was. It seems like Joanna has something she needs to interject. No?
No, I was just saying that Jan Roberts just had a great comment.
Just had a good, yeah, okay.
She said she loved the wisecracking gals, but wasn't it wonderful that Ginger Rogers told the director to pick Mary Pickford? Yes, they wanted jobs, but recognized talent.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Bill, weren't you interviewed on Fresh Air about Harry Warren?
No, about Hugh Martin.
Hugh Martin, thank you.
Thanks for remembering that. Anybody else?
Wayne's got his hand up.
Okay, go on, Grant.
It's me again. It's Wayne.
Okay.
Hi. Okay, I just had another question, and it was kind of going back. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Kind of going back, Bill, to your intro piece about this being sort of like the backstage musical, which was sort of like and how popular backstage musicals have been throughout movie musicals and what have you. And as I was watching this movie, I was kind of thinking about that and kind of thinking about like, I wonder what it is about this backstage musical and the time that it came out in that would make it appealing. And it kind of made me wonder, especially kind of going back to that question about like the code and decency and of course all of the innuendo that was in the film. It kind of occurred to me that at this time during the Depression era, maybe theater people were considered of looser morals.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
And, yeah, because all of the women in it, except for Ruby Keeler, they didn't seem very innocent. they seemed experienced.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And it kind of like went in hand with the Harvey Weinstein kind of character. That these are the kind of characters that populate that world.
Yeah,
men who are taking advantage of women, and women who kind of expect it or kind of go along with that or something, or have to maneuver that.
Yes.
And that Ruby Keeler was sort of this like innocent in the woods kind of thing, and yet she's the one that's singled out to be the star.
I know.
I kind of wondered if that played into it. Yeah. Anyway.
We have a few more minutes here. We're having a good time, so we'll go a few more minutes. We haven't talked about Ruby Keeler. How did you guys feel about Ruby Keeler in this movie? This was a big break.
Honestly, I was a little surprised because I've always known that she had this reputation as being a great dancer. And I honestly found her dancing to be a little clunky. Like she didn't seem very graceful to me. She was very lovely, like I thought she was very pretty and but I was surprised that I didn't find her dancing any more graceful than it was.
Yeah,
She
you and
stomps.
a lot of people
She
agree with
stomps. She doesn't tap.
you. Well,
She was, yeah, she was not my favorite either.
yeah, I'm going to defend her because, and I think I said this in the introduction, she was doing a style of dance that was losing popularity, even as she was doing it. And, you know, just a year or two later, we saw Ginger Rogers come to the fore with a very light kind of tap dancing that's so attractive. But Ruby was just doing what she had learned to do in vaudeville and what was very, very popular in vaudeville. In other words, making a lot of noise. That's what a lot of those dancers did. That's what they were trained to do. So,
She was cute though.
oh, she is cute, and she was married to Al Jolson, and God help her.
We're going to talk about that. You teased us in the preview. So what's that story?
Oh, well, it's just that, I mean, he was twice as old as she was, and he was, as I'm sure all of you know, an egomaniac. And she was just really sort of suckered into that relationship, which didn't last all that long. But I pity any young woman who ever had anything to do with Al Jolson. What do you think, Bob? Maybe one more question?
Yeah, one more question. Does anybody have or comment? Anybody? Anybody? This is your chance. Okay.
Herb's on camera.
Okay. And Sue wanted to say something? No? Oh, no? Okay.
Did one of them want to?
Yeah, do one of you want to say something?
Yeah.
Okay. Go on.
Terrific. It was a terrific program. The preview was wonderful. The movie was wonderful. The conversation we're having tonight is wonderful. What's next?
What's next? Oh, hi, Jan Roberts. Nice to see you. Do you have anything you want to just add here? You always have great stuff to say.
No, I liked it a lot, but I think it was Gandhi in the bed sheet and the because he was a thing. I mean, you know, this was his era. But how weird is that? I mean, somebody else in the comments said, "Yeah, that makes it even more."
It was Gandhi in the musical.
Yeah, right.
That's even weirder than I thought.
I agree, and the whole number was a little. I mean, I liked it, but what was it? It didn't make.
It was not like any of the other numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Gandhi's dance career certainly underappreciated, I think, until this film.
Yes,
thank
You're
you.
right.
And, oh, by the way, did you guys notice in the finale, the 42nd Street finale, did you catch the moment when the woman who is being beaten by her husband and jumps out the window, that she is then stabbed?
Stabbed?
Yes, I caught that.
I mean, really, in a musical?
Yeah.
Well, and the wife abuse was amazing.
The wife abuse, absolutely.
Her woman.
Well, okay, we're going to call it a night. But before we do, there are three things that we want to just mention along the way. Number one, if you enjoyed the session this evening and you're not already on our mailing list, for heaven's sake, forward your contact information through a private chat to us. You can do that right now, and we can make sure that you start to receive our emails. You can also sign up through our website, or you can call us at the number on your screen. So that's number one. Number two is we do hope you'll consider making a donation today at any level that is meaningful to you. Frankly, now more than ever, your support would help TMTP maintain operations. And you all know these are unprecedented times of financial loss for all arts organizations due to cancellations of live performances, and in our case, school closures. Our school program is so important to all. So here's number three, and then Bob and I will leave your screens. This is a tradition that we started, I guess, the first time we did one of these, which would have been a month ago. And that is to always include a lyric at the end that we think would be meaningful to you. Or in this case, it's a lyric I love by Al Dubin. who wrote this score with Harry Warren in 1933. And this number is so terrific. The music is by Harry Warren. They wrote it 2 years later in 1935. And I'm not going to sing it for you. You'll be happy about that. But I'm going to share most of it with you rhythmically, because it's absolutely a jazz tune. And when you hear me do it rhythmically, you'll understand why. And ever since 1935, it's been a favorite of jazz musicians and jazz singers. And the proof is in the pudding. I won't do the verse, just the chorus. Gotta get my old tuxedo pressed. Gotta sew a button on my vest, 'cause tonight I've gotta look my best. Lulu's back in town. Gotta get a half a buck somewhere. Gotta shine my shoes and slick my hair. Gotta get myself a boutonniere. Lulu's back in town. You can tell all my pets, all my Harlem coquettes, Mr. Otis regrets, that's a reference to a Cole Porter song, that he won't be around. You can tell the mailman not to call. I can't resist. I ain't coming home until the fall, and I might not get back home at all. Lulu's back in town. Let's hear it for Warren and Dubin. I'll tell you, they were great. Introduced by Dick Powell and the great Mills Brothers in 1935. Bob Knoll, thank you so much for making
everybody
with Let's Go to the Movies. And you're going to be back with us again in 2 weeks for the Q&A on a film that all of you will get a link to next week. Somebody asked what that film is going to be. Here's the answer. It's a masterpiece. It's MGM's An American in Paris with Gene Kelly and Leslie Caron. So we'll see you for that. Hopefully for my intro, for the film, and then for the Q&A 2 weeks for tonight. And so, good night, everybody. Thanks for being with us.
Good night.